Welcome. I am Chad Berry, Director of the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center at Berea College, and today we're talking with national best-selling novelist Silas House. So Silas, welcome. It's really a pleasure to have you here today.
Glad to be here.
You have a new novel, your fourth one, Eli the Good,
Right.
And I've heard you say that it's your favorite one.
Yeah.
Tell us why that's the case.
Well, I hope that each time I write a book, I'm becoming a better writer. And so really, in a way, your latest one is always your favorite one because you think it's better. But I just have a real emotional attachment to this little boy. I think that, in a way, the book is about the loss of innocence and freedom that our children have. And so it's sort of I think that I'm just endeared to him because he represents my childhood and the past, and I just became very attached to him and all these characters, and I still think a lot about them.
And there's a passage where he's referred to as maybe Eli the Great, but I think his aunt says, no, Eli the Good. Tell me about that.
Well, another thing the book is really about is trying to be the best person that you can be, and striving to live by the golden rule, which is what this little boy is trying to do. And at one point his aunt and he are having a discussion about his name and how he needs a king name because he's the king of the whole backyard. He's very in touch with nature. And he says that he wants to be Eli the Great, and she says, no, all the greats became great by killing people. You should be Eli the Good because they were good to their people. So,
and nature really does figure prominently. The trees. You write very beautifully about trees in this novel.
Well, I grew up playing in the woods, and I relied a lot on trees throughout my childhood. Well, that's really surprised me about the book since it came out, that people who have written to me, they've all written about the tree in the book, and I find that lots of people really had a tree in their childhood that was important to them, and I thought it was just me when I was writing this book.
No, I had one too, and I can see it. It was a big maple, and it had limbs that would just be perfect for a tree house, but I never got a tree house, but I spent many days in that tree. Well, let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Tell me about what life was like growing up.
Well, my parents had been raised very, very poor, and so when I was a child, they worked all the time. They were just determined to rise up out of that poverty, and my mother worked in the lunchroom at my elementary school, and my father worked in a factory that made fiberglass. He worked third shift, and so that sort of defined my childhood. We had to tiptoe around all day long while he slept and all that. But when their work was done, we would load up and usually go to a county away where my mother was from, and all my uncles and aunts, and we would go over to Leslie County and spend the summer and the weekends. And my books are really set, my first three especially, are really set in Leslie County, which is a little more mountainous than Laurel County, where I grew up, where everybody had to move to find work. So a big part of my childhood was, going back to the home place and experiencing that, and it's sort of like living in two worlds. I spent all my time out in the hills, playing in the creek, riding four-wheelers. So it was very much a childhood of nature and freedom. I can't believe how my parents just let me roam the hills. I can't imagine letting my children do that now, but I mean, it was a different world.
Well, it was a different world. How is that home community, the place that you went back to maybe in Leslie County, how has that changed in your relatively young lifetime?
Well,
and maybe how has it stayed the same?
I think that Leslie County has stayed the same in a big way, in that the economy, it's a mono economy. There's hardly any work. I mean, that's why people had to move a county or two away to get more work. However, Laurel County, where I went to school and where our home actually was, has changed a great deal because it's become so much more populated. When I was growing up, I really knew everybody in Lilly, Kentucky, and now that's just not the case. A big factory moved in not long ago and brought lots of people with it, and it's not the same place I grew up. And so I think that allows me to see the two sides of Appalachia. You know, Leslie County, which has not really changed that much and is relatively isolated away from the interstate and all that. Laurel County, which is on the interstate and has really changed. So I think that's what Appalachia is today. It's both worlds, and they're interchangeable, and it's a modern place, a place of great change.
And you go back to Leslie County often?
As much as I can. I mean, all my family have left there now, so it's really hard to go back there. It's a place of just remembering and somewhat of loss, because everybody had to leave to find work. And so, you know, now when we go back, it's mostly to visit the graves. Our family land was bought out in a really hard deal with a coal company, them claiming the land, et cetera. So I feel like it's a place of loss, and it's a place I really love.
That loss is a characteristic of so many families.
Yeah.
From the mountains and from the south.
Yeah.
We have countless photographs in my family of all of us standing behind the tombstone at decorations and that sort of thing, because you'd go back for that spiritual connection to home.
Yeah, there's a reason we're a fatalistic culture, because we're so used to losing things and having things taken.
I want to talk a little bit about your Appalachian identity, which as a writer, to many of your readers is so strong, and also as a human being. In what may be my favorite novel, The Cold Tattoo, although Eli is really breathing down its neck, you write so eloquently about how people, even those inside the region as much as outside the region, you don't just indict or call attention to people outside the region, but how people might view rural people in the mountains. And tell us about the first time you remember learning that Appalachia and the people who lived there were perceived differently.
Well, I guess it was the first time I was made fun of, you know, and for the way I talked. And I can't pinpoint that, you know, one moment because it happened so much when I was growing up. Anytime.
Was it in Laurel County, or was it?
It would probably
outside?
Be in Lexington,
okay.
You know, or somewhere pretty close. And that usually occurs because there's a little bit of self-hate amongst us. You know, I mean, we're ashamed of who we are sometimes, and that happens in every culture. So, I mean, I've experienced more that sort of feedback within the South than I have in, say, New York City or other places. I think there's a real divide in our country today amongst the rural and the urban. And that comes down to class. You know, a lot of times it's about class. We have a huge, I mean, still in this year, in 2010, we still have a class problem. We still have a race problem, you know. So the more progress that we make, we still have all these problems that we have to try to overcome. And I think that's one thing that literature can really do, is sort of try to bridge those gaps and create a dialogue that way. And
in Cold Tattoo, you write just so eloquently and poignantly, I think, about this perception that many people hold. Would you read that section for us?
Yeah, in this book in particular, I was thinking a lot about that, because I had been on 2 really long book tours and was really homesick a lot of the time, and I was thinking about the dignity of the people back home, and so often I would encounter people who didn't think that people had that dignity, that they were sort of like hillbilly stereotypes. So this is one of my favorite scenes in The Cold Tattoo. She broke the beans, 5 loud cracks at each knuckle of the bean, and let them fall into the bowl she had set on the floor beside her chair. A breeze moved through and lifted one corner of the newspaper she had spread across her lap to catch the strings and the brown places. There was a rhythm to bean breaking. It was persistent enough to make her consider tapping her foot, but at the same time it was the music of monotony, and this sound always made her reflect on her life and the excitement involved. She knew that it was outer forces that made her think this way. People were always going on about how you had to have some fun in your life, how you had to have adventures, but she had never wanted to be anywhere else but Free Creek. She didn't feel an empty place inside of herself because she had barely ventured out of these hills. She did, however, feel funny because she did not share the desires that the rest of the world seemed to have. She had never studied movie magazines and wished to be an actress, had never envied the people on television. The rest of the world was what was messed up. She thought about people who drove through Crow County or flew by on the new highway. If they saw this place, if they drove by Free Creek and saw her house with her and Elle sitting on the porch while she broke beans and he drank beer, she knew what they'd think. They would consider these people on the porch and wonder how they stood living such little lives, stuck in a small town where nothing ever happened, a place where the stores closed up at dusk and nobody famous ever came to speak or sing in a concert hall, a place where nobody important in their eyes had ever been born or lived. They would feel sorry for the people on the porch and the smallness of their existences, and be thankful that they themselves lived in places where there were fancy restaurants and tall buildings and jobs that you had to get dressed up for. But her life did not feel little at all to her.
That is so sharp. I remember the first time I read that, I slammed this book shut because it was so beautifully done and so pointed. So tell me about writing that. When you wrote that, sometimes when you write, I guess things just come out, and maybe sometimes they come out really beautifully, but other times it's painful to get things. How was it to write that?
Well, the good things are things you never plan. You know, they just happen, and that's what I love about writing. But besides it being a commentary on Appalachia and being Appalachian, I think that it's even more so a commentary on our sort of our national consciousness and how obsessed contemporary people seem to be with movie stars' lives. And I can't fathom people who you'll hear little girls saying Paris Hilton is their idol, and I'll think, why? What is it all heroic about somebody who's famous for being famous? And so I was thinking just as much about who we are as Americans as it being an Appalachian thing too. I think that we need to know more about our grandparents and less about celebrities. It's basically one thing I was getting at there.
So when you wrote that, did you think, was that a good day? I mean, was there pleasure in writing that, such a beautiful passage? Satisfaction?
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's I just read a small section of it, so it is, it's definitely a scene that people write to me about, and so I knew right away that it was a good scene. And like I said, when you know you've written a good scene, you sort of immediately know that you're not responsible for that. It's just sort of, that's the beautiful thing about writing. You get these gifts and you put them on the page, and you don't have anything to do with it.
I got to tell you, almost every time I leave Clay County on the Parkway and drive into Leslie County, I think about that scene, because you talk about the new highway.
Yeah.
Every time I reach there.
The Daniel Boone Parkway.
Yes. Yeah. Silas, another recent book of yours describes those who are fighting mountaintop removal in the region, and it's co-written, of course, with Jason Howard. But there are such strong feelings, as you know, these days about coal and mining, and some of us believe there's probably a war going on. It's not a war going on in the coal fields today. It's not covered much by mainstream media. Tell us why it was important for you to write a book about social protest.
Well, I grew up on a strip mine, and you know, saw all the negative parts of coal mining that way, I, you know, grew up with the blasting, you know, the noise, the dust, and the road being torn all to pieces all the time, the sort of disregard for the people in the community that this big corporation had. However, most of the men in my family were coal miners, and they were very proud of what they did. They knew they were doing an important job. There was such a great camaraderie among miners that I witnessed growing up. I loved sitting amongst all of them and hearing them tell stories of being in the mines. My grandfather lost his leg in the mines, went right back in 6 months afterwards and mined coal for 20 more years. So I saw both sides of it. Once I became more aware of mountaintop removal, I thought a lot about those complexities, and I really had to question, you know, what is the right thing here? Is, you know, the more that I learned about it, the more convinced I became that it was wrong, and that it was going against everything that the miners in my family had been about, because they had been very proud of being responsible miners, and miners who did their job with respect for the land, and miners who were doing something for the region instead of hurting the region. And so, you know, I mean, I never put any of the blame on the miners. One reason that I'm in this fight is because coal miners' jobs are being taken away by machines. There is no doubt about it. You can look at the number of jobs we had 20 years ago versus how many we have now, and there's, I mean, far, far less. So the thing is, it's such a complex issue. You can't just boil it down to a soundbite, which is what modern media is all about. If you can't boil it down to a soundbite, you can forget getting really good coverage. And so it continues to now be this war between grassroots activists who don't have anything but basically words and music against huge corporations, most of which are overseas, who have bottomless pockets. So you would look at that and think that's a pretty impossible fight. However, the words and the music have really given those bottomless pockets a run for their money in the last few years, and I think that's incredible.
Like words and music did in the civil rights movement.
Exactly, and it is a civil rights movement. It's you know, I mean, it's about people having all the rights that they deserve, and people's rights are being put under the thumb of these huge corporations. And the bad part about it is that small business owners who run responsible mines, they're the ones who get all the flack because they're here in the community. They're the ones doing the best job at it. These big corporations who are overseas have no connection to the land. They're doing the majority of the damage. They have nothing to lose.
And in this book, you and Jason going around talking with people like Denise Giardina or Nathan Hall or Kathy Mattea or Judy Bonds. What was it like hearing their story, their courage?
Well, we worked on this book for 2 years, and one in the morning I would be completely hopeless because of the evidence we'd encountered about how corrupt our system with this is, and then in the evening I would have interviewed one of these people and be completely full of hope that we were going to, that it was all going to end up good because there was so many good people doing the right thing. So I went back and forth the whole time. I mean, we encountered some stuff that just was hard to deal with. The fact that so many of these coal companies will mountaintop remove, and then they'll file bankruptcy so they don't have to reclaim it. That's despicable behavior. But then you meet people like Bev May, who's one of my heroes, who has worked hard her whole life to serve her community, and she finally builds herself a little house there at the mouth of the Holler she grew up in, and then she finds out they're going to mountaintop remove the ridge behind her house that her family has grown up on their whole lives,
And her story is really wonderfully told in a new film, as I know you've been a part of, called Deep Down. And
yeah, I love that movie.
I really do recommend it to people.
And that was one thing we wanted to do in the book, was we wanted to give these people the power to speak for themselves. And so it's part oral history and part just kind of sort of magazine-style features about them to introduce you to them.
Well, it's a very interesting book. You know, when you think about Leslie County, you think about, you've mentioned the mono economy, you've mentioned the loss of home and community, land in your family's case.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the future for rural Appalachia?
Well, I think that if we're going to have a good future in rural Appalachia, we have got to start looking at other options besides coal mining. I don't have anything against, we need coal. There's no doubt about it, but we have to have coal. However, we can mine it in a responsible way, and we can also look to other things too. I mean, our government should be starting up, you know, a real effort for solar energy and wind energy and all those things. And when they finally do that, the first place they need to come and train people how to do that is Appalachia. You know, miners need something to fall back on when the coal runs out. One thing that burns me up about the coal industry is that these coal associations, they assume that coal miners can't do anything but mine coal. These are smart men and women who can learn to do anything, and they're hard-working men and women, and they just want to provide for their families. So it burns me up when these coal officials assume that all they can do is one thing. They can learn to do lots of things, you know, and so we need to do that.
And that sense of place that people have in the mountains, in rural cultures worldwide, everywhere I've been, rural people tend to have such strong attachments. I think, what is it? I think Mr. Still called it the earth loved more than any other earth, and to have to leave that is just so...
We shouldn't have to tear down the place we live in to stay here. And that's what we're being forced to do.
Yeah, it's very sad. Well, Silas, faculty and staff and students here at Berea College are really excited about you, especially because it's been announced that you'll be coming to Berea College in August of 2010 to be the holder of the NEH Chair in Appalachian Studies. And we really are excited about your coming. And we're also honored that Appalachian Heritage, which is a literary quarterly that's published on campus, published your first story.
Yeah.
And I've heard you talk about that before. So there is a connection that you have with Berea, or have had with Berea. But tell us, what attracted you to Berea?
Well, you know, I mean, my whole life, I've heard about the good work being done at Berea College, and ever since I was little, I knew that Berea was a place I wanted to be and work, and I wanted to be a part of that service that the college does to this region. I mean, I can't think of another institution who has done as much for Appalachia as Berea College, and I love the mission of Berea. I love that it's always been about serving all people, and about the connection between all people, and the way that we need to serve each other. I mean, like I said, Eli the Good is about the golden rule, and that's something that I've, you know, thought so much about and try to speak so much about over the last few years. And I think Berea College just really speaks to that notion of the golden rule, a philosophy that exists in all the major religions, you know. And so I just can't think of a better place to be as far as one that serves my people, which is what I want to do. And being from Appalachia, you grow up hearing the place that you grew up in being made fun of, and that makes you love it even more. I mean, people ask me all the time, why are people so proud of being Appalachian? And it's because when what you are is made fun of, it makes you even more proud of who you are and where
defiant,
you're from.
right?
Yeah. And so I think just so much good work has been done at Berea and is being done, and especially what is being done here at the Appalachian Center is just amazing work and of great service to to the region and also to the country. And so I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Well, we're excited to have you here. We have a few minutes left, but I want to get you to tell us a little bit more about the novel that you're writing now. I think it's called Ivona, Darling?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, and then we may close with you reading a passage from Eli the Good.
Okay. Well, I'm just getting started on Ivona, Darling, and it's a book about parenthood, how far you would go for your child. It's also about an Appalachian who leaves Appalachia, is forced to leave, and that homesickness that occurs when she does. So, you know, part of that motherhood theme that's in it is about sort of the motherland of Appalachia too. And it's about putting aside yourself for the sake of your child.
It was
which is what all parents have to do.
Was the dollmaker influential?
Yeah. The dollmaker is a huge influence on Ivona, Darling. I don't know how you picked up on that, but that's one of the, when you first open the book, the first thing you see is a quote from the dollmaker, and it's a body has to have something to call their own, which Gertie says at one point in the book. So that's definitely there.
Well, you have been so much a part of, I think clearly it's an Appalachian literary renaissance right now, and your writing has touched so many people here in the region, but also I think around the country, and I think it must be interesting for you to get correspondence from people who are reading your works, because I think it's about Appalachia certainly, but it's about that rural culture.
Yeah.
That maybe exists. Could you read us a passage from Eli the Good as we close?
Well, yeah, and I think Appalachia has always been sort of a microcosm for America. So, you know, I think especially right now it's important, Appalachian literature is important because we're having such a shift in our sense of place as a nation, and so it falls to us to sort of preserve that. And that's another thing that I was trying to do in Eli the Good, but it's I think of it as more as my book that's the most American story of three that come before it.
Well, we've got about a minute left, so I love the beginning. That paragraph is powerful, so people will enjoy hearing it.
That was the summer of the bicentennial when all these things happened. My sister Josie began to hate our country and slap my mother's face. My wild Aunt Nell moved in with us, bringing along all 5,000 or so of her records and a green record player that ran on batteries. My father started going back to Vietnam in his dreams, and I saw him cry. My mother did the twist in front of the whole town and nearly lost us all. I was 10 years old, and I did something unforgivable.
That is such a beautiful beginning to what is really a great American novel. Silas, it's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
For you to sit down and talk with us, and
thank you much.
And thank you for all your good work. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Head of the Holler, coming to you from Berea College and the Loyal Jones Appalachian Center. You know, we have a number of events here in the Appalachian Center that are open and available to the public free of charge, and I would encourage you to check out our website at www.berea.edu/AC. It's got a lot of information on it, and I'm sure there are some events that will appeal to you. So until the next episode of Head of the Holler, we leave you now with a song from the Berea College Bluegrass Ensemble.
When I see hope in hopeless faces, someday they will love again. People come and walk beside me till our pathways divine, nothing much but love to give you, even less than I denied. People come and walk beside me till our pathways do divide, nothing much but love to give you, even less